Hello, welcome to episode 16 of the Real Talks podcast. If you're a first-time listener, I hope you enjoy listening to a show that lets you see another side to GAA players by focusing on the person rather than the athlete. You can find us on iTunes or SoundCloud by searching for Real Talks, and there you can access previous episodes with people like Cora Staunton, Kevin McMamamon, Eamon McGee, Michael Fennelly and many more. If you're a returning listener, thanks for the ongoing support. By the time you are tuning into this, we should be past the 50,000 play count, and I strongly encourage all our community to keep spreading the word about the podcast to your friends, family and teammates. Anyway, getting back to this week's show, it was a real pleasure to have Leitrim legend Colin Regan on the podcast, as this was a conversation I've been looking forward to having for some time. Over the last number of weeks, I've spoken to players who have won more things than they can remember, the likes of Oisin McConville, Breach Corkery. But judging people just by what they've won is a fairly shallow perspective. Colin Regan, a loyal servant to his county for 15 years, very much reminded me how fortunate we are to have so many inspiring and authentic leaders in our games. Over the course of this conversation, Colin talked about what it was like to be a fierce competitor for the county with the smallest population in Ireland, and how being a Protestant that thrived in the GAA jersey helped shape his identity and outlook on life. Now, in his role as Community and Health Manager in the GAA, he is adamant that the association is about so much more than just the games. My name is Alan O'Mara, and you are listening to episode 16 of the Real Talks podcast. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to having for a while, because I think there's a different aspect and avenue there that maybe haven't explored. And I was going to kick it off by, and you might kill me for this, but I was going to kick it off by reading a quote from a blog post that you did in 2013. I read it a couple of times over the last week or so, and just really stuck with me, and I related to an awful lot of it myself. And so I'll just throw it out to you, and then I'll see what was going through your head as I read it out. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in your own words, it says, one of the most common questions I was asked when, year after year, I returned to the fold of the Leitrim senior panel was, why do you do it? It's a question I never fully answered, or at the time had to answer. I guess I was just going on instinct for the best part of 15 years. It just felt like the right thing to do. I thought it was a really interesting perspective, and I was just curious to get it, I suppose, your own thoughts and explore that with you a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose, you know yourself, when you're in the middle of something, especially as something as busy as inter-county football and, you know, holding down various jobs outside the county at the time, so just constant travelling, you didn't actually have the opportunity to reflect on why I'm doing this. So it was only afterwards in retirement then, and it was kind of a forced retirement due to injury. So that led to even greater reflection and exploring of oneself, I think, a little bit, that I realised that it was just kind of very much bound up in my identity. And like I think we all are looking for largely two things in our lives, and one is meaning and purpose, and the other is something that gives us identity. And for me, sport was a massive part of my identity. I'm one of 7 boys in the family, and I have 5 sisters as well, so a big clan, you know, and it was important. I think we all in our own ways, like I'm number 11 out of the 12. So at the tail end of the family, in order to get noticed, you had to have an identity.
Had to be good at something.
Yeah, so, you know, there was my brother John would be, you know, he'd be known as the farmer, and you know, the hunt, you know, he does a good bit of hunting and breeds pedigree cattle, and, you know, Barber would be used to be known as the bike racer, and, you know, so there was my brother Gordon was a musician. So I discovered at a young age that I was good at sport, that I found that it reflected me quite well, that I really enjoyed pushing myself to the absolute limit, and sport was a really good avenue for that. And then in terms of Gaelic games, there was no big tradition of it in my family. We'd be Church of Ireland tradition, not that that, you know, excludes you from having a GAA tradition at all, but so I did my schooling, national school and secondary school outside of my home county, up in Donegal. But the club, when I come home at the weekends, provided me with an in into my local community that I might have missed otherwise, and a way to socialise with my friends at that age. And then as I was probably a late developer, because there was no GAA in my school. Hockey was the main one at secondary school. Hockey was the main sport. So when I actually started hitting like under 16 was only when I started to flourish a little bit in football, or at least, show some potential.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden I was up, playing at county level with under 16 minor, under 21. And it just opened up this here world of new identity, kind of in terms of coming from, first of all, being a Protestant, getting to represent my county in a very non-traditional Protestant way. So I think it really became bound up in a large part of how I saw myself, and took huge pride in that. And then, I suppose, one of the big values my mother and father would have instilled in the family was about giving something back and about community participation. So if you feel that you have the tools and the wherewithal to contribute in whatever way you can, and for me it happened to be football, and I just felt there was an onus and a responsibility on me then, for as long as I possibly could. If there was nobody that could take the jersey from me,
keep doing it.
Absolutely, do it as long as you can.
It's funny how you trace it back even to that very young age, where obviously, as you said, you're living away from home, in a way. So when you come back, it probably means that little bit more, and that you're getting to reintegrate with, say, the people that are around you. But also then, probably as you go up the years and as you get better, you also become sort of a, maybe prominent figure is not the right word, but you get that additional bit of respect, I suppose, and a bit of attention, which most young males have no issue with getting at times, whether they realise it or not. So, did that sort of help add to that as a key strand of your life?
Well, that's a good point, because you'd be out at home, Dad. We would have done a lot of the turf and hay and silage around the country. So we're a small farm, but did a bit of the contracting. And whenever you'd be out delivering turf up the mountains at Glenaid or up to Mullaghmore, or because where we're from, it kind of crosses boundaries. The very northern point of Leitrim.
Okay.
It's more of a region. We
Right.
almost consider it, because Drumcliff and Sligo and Mullaghmore and Bundoran and even Garrison and Fermanagh, there are natural hinterlands. So we'd be delivering turf here, there and everywhere, or hay, doing hay, and they'd always say, "Oh, is that the footballer?" And that's what you. So even if you didn't immediately identify
People
yourself,
are tagging it onto
people are tagging it onto you. So I guess it can be a pro and a con, because you can become. I was lucky; I had a lot of other interests in my life as well. I played a lot of soccer. I have interest in the arts, writing in particular, and so I never. I remember meeting an old girlfriend's mother for the first time, and that was her first. She goes, "Oh, is this the footballer?" And I goes, "Amongst other things." Yeah. So yeah, it depends on how much you let it become your identity. Others will tag you with it. And that, there's no doubt that can be flattering at times as well.
Definitely. No, I think the fact even at that age group, so are you late teens at that stage, or in middle of the teens, where you're able to say, amongst other things, that you probably had a self-awareness there maybe that not everyone has at that age, and where that they let the, I suppose, the attention that comes with playing for football, because if you're representing your club or representing your county, like you said, it just becomes that topic starter conversation on the label. Was having that self-awareness at a younger age something that you appreciate now looking back, or did you realise you had that at the time?
I realised that there was more to me than sport, and that was obviously, a lot of that came from the home as well, because I wasn't surrounded in GAA in the house. I was the GAA in the house. Pretty much. My older brother Barber would have played a good bit, but he did most of his playing over in London during the 80s when he emigrated. Played with your Connell Gales over there.
Right.
But apart from us two, the next brother up from me, Gordon, would have played up to just a bit of senior ball, but then discovered music, and the two don't often mix, so he went down that route. It was nice, and that it wasn't all encompassing. And sometimes I think even in my own club, that constant analysis and discussion around football, even in the immediate aftermath of a game, was never something that really did it for me. I was a huge reflector on the game itself, but in my own time, and as soon as the game was over, I'd usually be looking to some other thing to interest me and occupy me.
I just thought that was interesting, because I know, like, over the podcast, this is episode 16, over the previous 15, lots of people would have spoke about those identity, maybe issues mightn't be the right word, but just that sort of sense of trying to understand oneself and maybe recognising that you're a person as well as a player, really. I suppose on the playing side, maybe, so we'll probably come full loop and come back to some of the other stuff too that you've mentioned there. I suppose even at the stage we are now, where you reflect back, what year did you make your Leitrim senior debut at? When would that have been?
Made my debut then in '97. Got an absolute hiding at the hands of Galway, and in '98 in the championship. Made my league debut in '97 and championship debut in '98, and on their way to their All Ireland glory, of course. Phenomenal Galway team. Played pretty much. I lived in Boston for 2 years.
And what years were those?
2000 to 2002. And apart from those two, like I played the championship of 2000 all right at home, but apart from that, then injury in 2010. I dislocated my knee, and so that was the end of the inter-county. So just managed to bridge 3 decades.
It was over 3 decades within a 15-year, I suppose, spell. Like, it's quite a long and prolonged career. And so when you mentioned, say, your championship debut, you get an absolute tanking from Galway, and you go away 2001, and you're away. And I know we've touched upon some of the identity issues there, but when you're coming back in, like, what's in your own head but signing back up for that, in terms of putting your body on the line, in terms of giving that sort of, I suppose it is the commitment, in terms of, and you mentioned that you already knew at this stage that you had other things that you were interested in. So what was the big thing that was drawing you back in to say, I want to do this?
In that facet of my life, just to see the best that I could be. I loved the commitment. Yeah. I probably would have been quite good in the army, I think, because that suits me. Yeah. And like, I could never some of my managers it was overtraining. Right. Okay. You know, with me, I used to, when
you'd never made it as a goalie.
No. Yeah. No, I'd never. No hope as a keeper. And now, I lived in Letterkenny for 4 years, working with the Donegal News up there, and our training base at the time was the rugby club in Longford, under both Declan Rowley as manager and Desi Dolan senior. So that was a 3 hour plus drive. Yeah, proper drive, northwest drive.
You're not on the motorway.
Yeah, you're not on the motorway, and you're pushing the limit. And so 6 hour round trip getting back into Letterkenny at 1:30, and that it drained the body absolutely, but never during that period did it drain the mind.
Really?
Not during that period. Not really. I was always hungry to get to training. I was always hungry. At times you'd be bitching and moaning about it, of course, in it. But as soon as it was over and the next one the goal was set, I was ready for it. The only time that it burnt me out was, and the irony was, it was the only time I ever lived in Leitrim. Right. While playing, and in Carrick-on-Shannon, I was editor of a local paper for the time, and it was just an impossible load to juggle.
Do you put that down to, obviously, the workload? I know and I'm familiar with, because I was working in a sister newspaper at the same time, which seems like about 3 lifetimes ago for the two of us. I know. Huh? But it's just an interesting point that the only time you felt that burned out was when you were at home. And was it just the job, or was it also then the emotional baggage or the conversations that were constantly around it then? Did that add to it? It was interest?
It was a little bit of my life at the time added to it, all right. We went to print on a Tuesday morning, so I remember in particular one time we were over for a National League match in London. The game got cancelled the morning of the game. I was just fit to be tied, because it looked like, I was surprised that we made the trip. The weather wasn't good, and
you should magically fill 2 pages as well, I'd say, or 4.
First of all, fly back to Dublin, drive to the Carrick-on-Shannon, get into the office at 8 in the evening and stay there till 2 o'clock Monday morning, and back in again at 7 Monday morning. So, and there was regular times travelling home from National League matches with the laptop open on the back of the bus or on the passenger seat of one of the lads' cars doing the column on the game. So it was just there was no off, zero off at the time, and nobody.
It's an interesting point, that one.
Nobody can function, I believe, in a space without downtime, both mentally. I think you can operate better with less downtime physically than you can mentally.
I think that's a great point, because there's definitely a balance act there. I remember someone said to me years ago, I was doing a talk, and they were like, if you got into the best car in the world and you just put the foot on the gas to the floor and just kept doing that and never gave it a break, never let up, something's going to give. I think sometimes we get tricked into thinking that that we can sort of beat that system, but I suppose what you're probably saying there is we can't. Like,
there is no, that's a dysfunctional system. So it is. So if we try to operate in that, something always gives. And I think that's largely why we're seeing a lot of people. That's why stress at the moment is the number one reason why people are absent from work, passing out low back pain. And the majority of that back pain, I believe, would have been caused by stress anyway, because stress manifests in many ways for many people. And, people think, oh, I put my back out because I lifted something wrong. Well, probably not. Actually, it's probably because your back was ready to go, and it's signifying something a lot deeper that's troubling the body and the mind.
I suppose there's a certain culture of busyness, for the want of a better phrase, that we have. When you ask someone, how are you getting on, and your first reply to me might be, I'm very busy. And we all sort of wear that as a badge of honour. I'm like, oh, I'm busy. Like, how are you? Oh, I'm busy too. Like, you're busy. Oh, I'm busy. Oh, deadly. Like,
half as busy as me.
Busy. But like, the question only is, when you ask someone how you're getting on, is in an ideal world, they'd like to hear back, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And even though you are obviously very busy during those times, and you mentioned, say, that one when the newspaper where maybe it was getting stuck a bit, but for the large parts of playing and the commitment and involved, and just taking on that in your life, where it was happiness though, was it?
It was. At that particular period when I had too much on, I wasn't enjoying. I wasn't enjoying my private life. I wasn't enjoying my football, and I wasn't enjoying my career. And when I managed to pull back, all of a sudden I found that joy. It's a big part of who I am anyway. I'm a very positive. I've got a positive outlook on life. I love my life. I enjoy life. I enjoy sharing it with my friends and family. And at that particular time of my life, I wasn't. So it was very alien to me, and I could see that I wasn't myself, and others could see that I wasn't myself as well.
On that spell, because I think there will be people listening that are going to having a stressful time in work, say they aren't enjoying it, or if they're someone that's playing sport is injured, is out at the minute. I suppose, how did you navigate those problems? Obviously, you mentioned it, you were able to identify it, maybe not straight away, but after a while. But were you able to sort of, you clearly were, but able to navigate that to alleviate if it's pressure that you were feeling?
Sometimes life intervenes as well, and something does give. Like I remember chatting to Desi at the time and just saying, I actually need to take a step back here. And remember Noel Moran was selected.
This is Desi Dolan, the manager at the time.
Desi Dolan Senior.
Yeah.
He actually had a good chat with me, and I had a good chat with him, talking about, well, is this actually the part of your life that you need to pull back from? And it wasn't, because I did manage to pull back a little bit from work instead. And later that summer, we had just a phenomenal run with the Tommy Murphy Cup.
Yes.
And people can be quite disparaging about the Tommy Murphy Cup, but actually the couple of games, that run that we got, was amongst the most enjoyable football I played in my career with Leitrim.
What was it about that?
It was because it was there was no pressure. There was throw the cards and see how they fall kind of attitude within the squad. There was a few boys that got an opportunity that probably wouldn't have had an opportunity maybe in the championship, and really made a bit of a name for themselves, and that energy was contagious. And you know what, we had a couple of writing nights out together as a squad as well. During that time that we often didn't get the chance to, because we were spread all over the four corners of the country. And it was a lot of fun, as sports should be. Yeah,
that's what's like the fact. And look, I'm not going to get into a fixtures conversation now. And when I started this podcast series, I was like, one of the things I'm never talking about is the fixture calendar, right? Because there's no point.
Don't mention the F word.
But I just thought it was interesting for you to say there that if it was less pressure, but more importantly, I think, is that it actually became a feeling where lads felt they could go out and enjoy it and express themselves. And is that something, I suppose, over the course of your entire playing career, is that something that you manage to do more often than not, though? Because it always strikes me as you were that type of person anyway, that liked to play, liked the spirit of it, like giving it their all and seeing where, and if you end up on the deck or if you end up on top, that's fine. But was that something that you enjoyed from your career playing? That
was my underlying attitude towards my career, was just give your absolute all, and if that isn't good enough, then you have absolutely no regret. And I think obviously I used to live with the fear of losing and failure, and be driven by that to a degree as well. I'm human like that. But I remember I had a good lesson. It's funny where you pick up lessons like at boarding school one time, and I was the most competitive person I know, and I used to we used to race back from. First of all, we'd race up to school before school to get a game in before school, game of soccer. Then at lunchtime, try and fit something in, and then race back up to the boarding house after and get some five-a-side going. And my younger brother Stuart was a year below me, and we were playing one day, and I ate him out of it, for something. Not exactly the FA Cup final, but I still ate him out of it.
Yeah.
And this lad Eddie Harn, I'll never forget it, a boy from Ballindrae, just said to me, Stuart doesn't take it as seriously as you do, and Stuart's trying his best,
Can your brain process that at the time?
It was after, even at that young age afterwards, it was an absolutely invaluable lesson. I'd say I was about 15, and I don't think I've ever had the same attitude to losing since. Or no, I'd say a lot of my teammates would say that I didn't ever stop.
Yeah, but that's slightly different though with teammates, because you're in a competitive environment.
Yeah,
but you're talking about being in. That's a completely different environment.
It is a completely different environment, and it was just one of those really valuable life lessons that I've tried to carry with me to mixed success. Yeah. With I've had lapses, but it's absolutely one that meant a lot to me. Learning that at a fairly young age.
Can I ask you then, because obviously that lesson is a very, very valuable one, and I think lots of people listen to that will either have been the person that was given out to someone else, or will have been the person that's been given out to. And sometimes if you're the person maybe that's been given out to, that tends to turn them away from sport. So be it a coach to a young child, or a teammate to their friend. But over the course of your career with Leitrim, there was more defeats than victories. That's in championship. That's just it by nature. So was it ever problematic for you trying to, obviously, even though you've learned that lesson, but actually trying to not accept is not going to be the right word, but there is only a certain percentage of control you have as an individual player. But there's loads of different factors in terms if it's Leitrim against Dublin, with population, and you can go into all that stuff. But you know where I'm coming from in terms of the actual being an individual with that mindset, I suppose, and being in a team maybe that is trying to get up and trying to develop, but it's not, or I suppose not one of the top tier counties. Was that ever problematic for you? Did it ever challenge you to say maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe this is not the right place to be? I know I've gone long-winded with that question, but I'm trying to explain.
No, I know what you mean. No, I would, I lived in Letterkenny I was staying for a few years, and would have trained with St Eunan's at some stages, and they were pushing hard for Donegal championships. And my own club, we won a championship first senior championship in '98 since '61 or '62.
Okay. That must have been a huge high.
It was phenomenal. It was a real milestone for the club and the community and for all the players involved. And we chased another title right throughout the noughties and probably threw a couple away. And at the same time, the Leitrim team, after following good work by Joe Reynolds, Peter McGinnity, Joe Reynolds, and Declan Rowley, we really had a group for 4 years under Desi Dolan's senior that I feel we absolutely should have won a Connacht title, but we just didn't have that final nth degree, and I think the big part of that was the winning habit. So we were absolutely competitive, and we pushed Mayo in 2006 in the semi-final to a point, and I think had we gotten over that, I think we would have won the Connacht title that year. And I think that was one of the years. The day before, my younger brother Stuart got married before that game, and I was best man, and heading off from the wedding at 11:15. Just as the two groomsmen.
Did you drop the mic and just walk in?
That was a toughie. A family wedding. Your little brother. We're Irish twins. 361 days between us.
Yeah.
The two groomsmen had just appeared in the Dumb and Dumber tops and tails suits, so it was going to be a good night. Yeah. Box you were just about to kick on, and you got to walk away, and then to go out and lose by a point, it was a kick in the guts. But that was the year then we went and we got to the Tommy Murphy Cup final, and so it kind of goes back to the other point I was making earlier. If you have done everything you can possibly do, and I would have left zero stone unturned in my preparation in terms of diet and strength and conditioning and sleep, and every potential centimetre I could eke out of it. And afterwards then, absolutely, you're devastated, absolutely devastated. But you realise that, you know, okay, we gave our all. And in hindsight now, you know, looking way back on it, you could probably see things that could have happened within the entire squad that might have, you know, gotten us that extra percent that we needed to get over the line. As you know, as Sligo managed, you know, when they won a brilliant Connacht title there with Eamon O'Hara scoring a cracking goal, and we just needed that X factor in a game every now and then. That goal of the calibre of the type that Eamon scored. You know, we lost a qualifier match after extra time to Donegal. We lost a qualifier match after extra time to Meath. You know, and we just couldn't quite make that breakthrough. And looking back, that's a disappointment.
Yeah.
But it was never enough to send me scurrying away while I was in the midst of it.
Just as I'm listening to you there, obviously, like the passion that you had for it, the enjoyment, even as you recall different games there, like you crack a smile even as you're thinking about it, you know. I know you referenced earlier on in terms of the injury, which did end during your career, which was in 2010. So, like, it's a 15-year gap where on and off you've been given an awful lot for that. And I know I would have spoke to Dermot earlier about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of when, like, there's two types of retirements. There's the Brian O'Driscoll where you walk out the stadium waving and everyone's clapping at you, or there's if Paul O'Connell would have had a different one where he was carried off on a stretcher, or someone else would get an injury in training that ends it. And I suppose from your perspective, which I think your competitive spirit has come across really well there and strong, how difficult was it for you to process that injury is stopping me from doing this when you probably felt you were fit enough to still, in every other way, shape or form? Was that a difficult one to swallow and accept?
Massive. I'll never forget getting... So I dislocated my knee on a Sunday. We had played National League on the Saturday.
Right.
First challenge match of the year for the club.
Right, okay.
Typical scenario. Wasn't even supposed to be playing. Went down to... Some of the lads didn't show up.
Yeah.
I had driven down from Carrick and Shannon and went out. Just about a minute before half-time, a lad came in on top of me. I was just pushing off on the left leg.
Studs were in the ground.
Studs were in the ground, knee was fully extended, and a big lump from Ballantrae,
right.
About 15 stone plus, landed on just open, full dislocation of the left knee. So I did the ACL, the PCL, and the MCL in one foul swoop, and pretty much wiped out the cartilage in it as well. And I remember Declan Loftus was the team doctor with Leitrim, an absolute legend for about, I think he was with them for about 25 years. And, you know, it took a good while for me to even get, there was so much swelling to get scans and all this crack. And when he finally rang me, I was back in at home, you know, obviously couldn't walk, couldn't drive, couldn't do anything. Stuck. And he just says, it's the worst I've ever seen, Colin, pretty much. And I remember just hanging up the phone and, a few tears. Just
did it hit you straight away? Did it impact that?
I knew it was so bad. I had been prepping myself. I was trying to convince myself it mightn't be as bad. Okay. But and then all of a sudden, just my entire kind of physical life, way beyond football, you know, because I used to do a lot of, and still do a bit now. I'm back doing a bit of hill running. Mountain running is a big passion of mine. Trail running. You know, we played a lot of soccer. Little bit of dabbled a wee bit. I was just starting to dabble a bit with surfing and getting into that a little bit.
So that's all taken away from you in one swoop.
And one of the other things I absolutely love, is a good dance. And you know, I was just
I've seen you in action.
And actually, that was one of the things I was like, fucking hell, am I never going to be able to go out and blow off with a great dance again? And I went downstairs. I remember hobbled down the stairs. We converted attic in the home place, and like all the times I've played, my mum has only ever seen me participate in sport once in my life, and that was a soccer FAI Junior Cup final, Connacht Cup final, and I think she only happened to be up in Sligo and popped in. She didn't, so she could see I was upset, and she asked what was wrong. I says, I don't think I'll ever be able to play sport again, you know. And she goes, that might be for the best. How
did that sit with you when you hear those words? Because as I said, I'm just trying to comprehend how big of a pill that was to swallow. And that, I said, because I don't think people sometimes realise when someone says to you can't play, people go, Grant, you know yourself, lots of other things in life go on with it. But as you hit upon it there, and I see is that it actually impacts on an awful lot of things. And if you're someone that, you know, is an active person that likes the physical exertion, to get the endorphins going, to feel good, to connect outdoors, it's actually a lot more than people think sometimes in terms of injuries and the impact that they have. And then obviously naturally by nature, that's going to have an impact on your mental aspect because you're not getting your kicks. Like, it's quite a vicious circle in a way.
It is.
So how do you go about navigating that then?
It's challenging because, like you said, my stress buster was exercise.
Yeah.
And getting out into nature and getting, up into the top of a mountain on my own with my dog. And so it was probably, for me, I think most things in your life happen for a reason, and it provided me with another serious period of reflection and assessment of where my identity was and who I was and what I wanted from life and how I was going to get it and navigate the next few years of my life. And
what answers do you find in that period? Because I said they're big questions to be thrown at you.
Yeah, they're big questions, and I got initially just overwhelmed, to be frank and absolutely
that's completely understandable.
Honest. Yeah, and at the time, like I'd finished up with the paper. I had just finished a long-term relationship, so I was in this complete state of flux, and all of a sudden, I found myself unable to even drive, living back in the home place with mum and dad, and so I decided eventually, after much ruminating and discussion and soundboarding, and called on some really good people, friends, and my network, and decided, okay, well, I was going to go back and further my education and try to move my career into the area of sport.
Okay.
And that's exactly what I did. I did a master's out in UCD in sports management in 2010-11, and I'm also a huge believer in providence, and as often happens when you put your life on a certain path, then doors along that path open up. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough a job came up here in Croke Park. Not a job that I would have earmarked myself for at all, but the timing of it, I was just going for interview the week I was due to hand in finishing up my thesis, and went for it and got it, and been here 6 years now. Yeah. I chose to move it another direction at a stage in my life. I still am lucky enough to be able to, write a column, a bi-weekly column with the Leitrim Observer back home, and it keeps very much. I miss Leitrim while living in Dublin, and because that's where all my family is and a big part of my heart, and it's a great way for me to be able to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening about home.
What do you miss about Leitrim? Obviously, you've referenced family there. Because Joey, we all hear the phrase "lovely Leitrim," and I've only been in it a few times, and I just find there is something. I don't know if spiritual is the right word. I don't know maybe what the word is, but I just find there's something about Leitrim that, and I think people are aware of it that are from there.
It's a vortex for lunatics, and that's one of my favourite things.
That's why you got kicked out.
We were at quota. So it has some of the best characters I've ever come across, but it also has a definite energy that I'm constantly drawn to, and also the pace of life. We were talking about that fast world that we all live in now. I love the antidote of getting up home from Dublin. Like, don't get me, I love Dublin too. There's the city has.
But it's a balance, isn't it?
It's a balance, and Leitrim is it's my it's the yin to the yang to the yin, I suppose.
There's something incredibly brilliant about when you get to be at your auntie's house, your own house. If you have one of those magic houses that has no phone coverage. And imagine there's a few down Leitrim, there's plenty of them in Cavan as well. And not normally everyone's first reaction is always, there's no coverage here, they're walking around holding the phone up, or what's the Wi-Fi? But I don't know, do you find when you go back home that you are able to get that, particularly say referencing back to the Leitrim post time that you had when you were younger, where it was very all consuming and all over you? Do you find it is important to get those little checkpoints and keep that sort of, I think balance is the word I'll stick with, but just to have that in your life.
Oh, it's essential. And even there's just up there, if there's a car, two cars in the road, having a chat, the next person who come along doesn't sit on the horn. They usually get out and see what they're talking about and join in. And my father was a famous rambling man. Like every house, whether he was invited or not or welcome or not, he'd call into.
One of those spirits.
Just one of those, and he. I think he imbued a lot of that in me as well, and it takes any weekend I am up home, it takes me the weekend to try to see all my siblings anyway, and all my nephews and nieces, and
it's a connection piece.
It's a big connection piece, but there's that energy around certain locations up there as well that it's quite. I find it very healing anyway, and very therapeutic, and it's as I said, Leitrim can be the antidote for me to Dublin sometimes, but I think it's also a little bit of the antidote to modern life. Now, that's not to say people don't have their challenges, and we obviously do, but there's an appreciation up there. There's an art in just being and doing nothing. Sometimes just being present. That's I think it can't but do you good if you tap into it every now and then.
A lot of the stuff that you've mentioned there probably does tie back into someone's well-being, to be just, and look, you can't, if you do that all the time, someone can get lost and feel like I'm not going, but as you said, it is a counterbalance thing. And one of the last questions in terms of your own play, and I suppose forming the conversation on, was, even though the doc has that call with you and says your knee is gonzo and you're out of action, you didn't fully accept that though, did you? Like, you were ended up going back in and playing with the club eventually. Am I right in that?
You're right, yeah. And it wasn't so much about, as it started, it wasn't so much about sport. It was about getting functionality back into my knee and into my life, and being able to do what I felt would be important to me in terms, just even of
medium to long term,
and just even keeping fit, and as you said, being able to go out for a dance with your friends, and being able to tap into that element of yourself. But with the guidance of it was Ray Moore who did the operation, and then Keith Fox he's a nephew of Desi Dolan Senior,
right?
And he was our physio for 4 years with Leitrim, and he's with the Irish rugby team now actually. And Keith said to me, Colin, if you actually follow the programme that I'm putting you on diligently, I'll get you back playing. It might take 2 years, but I'll get you there.
What went through your mind when you heard that line after? Probably because you've probably only digested the others or started to.
Exactly.
What's going? Is your head spinning?
No, it was a buzz. It was an absolute buzz, and I just made my mind up there and then. I will do anything you say, for as long as you tell me. And if it.
And how long did you say this was after?
So I did it on the 24th. The injury on the 24th of February. Had the operation on the 13th of May, which was my mum's birthday.
Okay.
And then probably met Keith for the first time sometime around that September,
right,
October, when I'd moved up to Dublin to start the course.
Yeah.
So it took 2 years before I could run again, pretty much, rehabbing it 5-6 days a week, sometimes 7, and got back.
Was that enjoyable, or was that struggle? A
mixture of both. It was. I tried to count the blessings that I was able to do it and was working towards an end goal.
Okay.
And a few times, if it wasn't for the likes of the help of my friend Gareth Phelan, who would have been my club and county goalkeeper for teammates for our entire career, and he was my best man a couple of years ago.
Right. Everyone needs a good goalie.
Everyone does need a good keeper, exactly. Yeah. And like Gareth's a physical therapist as well, so he worked. He complemented what I was doing with Keith.
Yes,
but he's also like most,
and he's more of a supportive mechanism as well.
Exactly. So when I couldn't, when I still wasn't driving and stuff, he used to be coming in and getting me in just to go into the gym and do a bit of upper body stuff, and he's a bit of a, he's a good shrink as well, actually, Gareth. So he has like a lot of therapy, like a lot of physios or physical therapists, they're skilled in the arts of listening to people, and so it was and then at times, because it was so basic initially, I was just learning the need to walk again. So it was frustrating, of course, as well, stepping up and stepping down and stepping up and stepping down.
That's frustrating for anybody, I'd say. But obviously, then when you're coming from a place where you've been performing to a high level, and as you said, you're like that competitive spirit, it is a grind as well. Like, I think it's important to probably recognise that it's not just
it's a grind. It's a proper grind. You have to find the humour in it sometimes. Like,
where did those spots come from?
Like, I was in an apartment in Fisherman's Wharf in Irish Town, up on like the 3rd floor with a mate of mine, Kevin Haughey from Donegal Town, who had also found himself back in UCD. We were freshers at the age of 34, the two of us. So that was actually brilliant timing to have a wingman.
Yeah.
And so, like that. But I lived on one of those wee trampettes, the little trampolines, the wee tiny ones.
Small ones.
So every evening when I come in from college, I'd just be on it for about 2 hours, and I could see the people across the courtyard. And all they could see was this fella's head, bobbing up and down for about. There would be actually people out on their balconies, like, what the hell is going on in that apartment?
Boing, boing, boing.
Yeah, or heading down to the Markovich community gym and pool there, which are city buoyancy belt on you, to go aqua running when there was all these people, lads in, pumping big iron and everything. Looks like you're heading off to the pool with a nappy on you. So you have to find those wee pieces of, almost, I don't know what it is, irony or what it is, to keep you going. And then just really, what worked very well for me at the time, and I'd recommend to people, if you're on a long recovery journey where it's very slow incremental improvements, is to keep a journal. And to mark the little improvements. And also when you get setbacks, because a little thing, at the early stages of such big recovery rehabs, I found anyway, there often isn't rhyme or reason to why you progress. And take one step forward, 2 steps back one day, 2 steps forward, 1 step back the next day. And then all of a sudden you start seeing a bit of progression and pattern. And if you can trace that through the journal and see what you're doing, it helped me in the mind space anyway, definitely.
From listening to you over the last while, I get the impression that you always got a sense that the GAA was about more than just playing or more than just winning. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, as I said, tracing it back for me for that kind of entry into my own community, I was always very grateful for that. And I think back when we went to Fennelly down in Galway back in, it must have been 85 or thereabouts, and I had a brilliant trip. I was staying with Aidan Dolan. He's still a great mate today. And, the Sunday morning then, everyone into Galway Cathedral for Mass, and I could just see our two mentors, I think it was Jimmy Phelan and Terry Tiffany. The two of them just looked at each other and they go, Jesus, what about Regan?
As if you're going to melt.
I know. I was like, lads, it's all right. I have been in a Catholic church before. I'm all good. And actually, I hadn't really been in them that often, but I was looking forward to the whole experience. And I got the few of the boys to give me the lowdown on how to bless myself, and went up and get the communion and all that. So
that's hilarious.
So it's always been for me, even that, to get to share that with the lads. And everything was good crack, and a bit of banter from the get go, and so it has. I've seen Michael McGowan is kind of the godfather of Melvin Gales, right? And he was the principal of the De La Salle school, and that's where most of the team went. But I went to boarding school up in Rafo, so Mickey and my dad would have been of cut from the same tree, similar ilk, and. I just loved the fact that through football I got to know Mickey, and he, at one stage in I think the late 70s, he was Leitrim County chairman, senior and under 21 manager, and probably psychologist for the minors as well, I travelled up and down the by roads of the country and Leitrim with Mickey, and me in the passenger seat, and he gave me an education in life.
That's what I was just going to say. You must pick up. You probably don't realise at the time, but when you reflect on, say, conversations that you either are part of or over here, you must have picked up an awful lot, did you?
He's like just hilarious. So he was fluent in Irish and in Latin, and he was a fine hurler, and just a simple example would be stopping off on the eve of May Day on the way home from a Leitrim match to pick mayflowers in a field, and when we got home, put them out on the windowsills and the footstills of the house, and he was there, now make sure you put them out and keep the fairies away from the house tonight, and it was so much more than an education about football.
That's what I was just going to say, because we referenced on from your own self and the identity sense, and maybe realise from an early age that there's more going on here and there's more to you. And that just the line you gave me about, amongst other things, I think really captured it. But it sounds like a chunk of that probably came from that source.
Yeah. And I think Mickey, as we call him, was probably the only man that Dad would have allowed come to our house and pick me up in a field that the hay was down for baling in, or or come over to the bog and take me away, because he knew that Mickey was the hardest working man that would, he'd live in the bog himself if that was needed. But if I was wanted for football and Mickey wanted me, then there must have been a good enough reason for it. And then Dad actually started getting into, following all the club and the county a bit as well. And that brought that bit of pride for me then as well, I suppose. And Dad, he was he was a larger than life character and very visible, and whether he was wearing a big blue sombrero at the Melvin Gales matches, or a big straw hat or 10-gallon hat at the Leitrim matches with the green and gold tied into it. So he was the only voice that I could you'd hear standing out in the crowd, in a full house in Park Sean or something like that. Yeah. So it was, for me, it was the GAA always represented community for me rather than just the games.
It's a really, really strong point, and I think it'll lead us in nicely to, I suppose, your work at the moment and what you're doing. You mentioned that you started here in Croke Park in 2011, so I suppose maybe you might just explain a little bit of sort of where that came from and where it is now and what you're doing, and really just, I suppose, why you're doing it and the benefit of it, really. The
feedback from clubs was that, that we're looking for something more holistic, and I've always appreciated that every single facet of your health is linked and intertwined. I don't believe there's anything there isn't just emotional health or physical health or social health, or spiritual health. They're all interlinked and interdependent. And so we sat down with the Department of Health, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Tony Houlihan and Biddy O'Neill from the HSE's Health Promotion Division at the time, and said, let's look at devising a model that focuses a more holistic approach to health and looks at the GAA club as that could become a hub for health for its members, but also reaching that influence out into the wider community. So over the last 4-5 years now, we've been devising this here model, the GAA Healthy Club model, and we started out just with a very small number, 16 clubs with 2 mentoring clubs in phase 1, 4 from each province. That ran for kind of 2 years as we were trying to develop the model. Then 2 years ago, we went into phase 2, and that was 60 clubs. There's at least one in each county involved in it now. And on the 4th of November, actually, they're going to be recognised in here in Croke Park as the GAA's and actually Ireland's first official healthy clubs.
Brilliant.
So you'll have heard of healthy schools and healthy cities, and there's actually a healthy county network even now.
Okay.
So this is the first time that it's been transferred into the sports club setting, and it's kind of following the principles of health promotion as laid down in the Ottawa Charter by the World Health Organization, that individuals can only play a certain amount of influence on their own health and well-being, and they are obviously a significant part in terms of determining their behaviours and actions and their social networks and choices. But the settings in which we live, work and play, the environment also has a massive influence on how... Let's a very simple example in a GAA club. If underage players are given fizzy drinks and crisps after training sessions and matches, then... that is at odds with the philosophy that we're trying to promote around healthy eating. And we know that Ireland has a massive obesity problem, especially with juvenile young boys and girls at the moment. So instead, if a club can make a simple shift through some healthy eating guidelines, that they provide water and fruit. And from the experience of the 60 clubs in phase 2, once that shift is made and becomes the norm, the children love it. The juveniles love it. That's what they seek out, and they know that that's what their county players are doing. They want to emulate them if they possibly can.
It's creating, I suppose, it's creating an environment that can help people to flourish and to be well, rather than not trying to make someone be well, but giving more opportunities for wellness. Is that a fair summation of it?
In a line, the kind of elevator pitch, our mission is to make the GAA a healthier place for everybody to enjoy. And a healthy club isn't just about what we put into our bodies or how much we run around. Sure. It's about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to express themselves at a level that reflects their ability, and to recognise that it's just not acceptable for any youngster to sit on a bench while the 15 best players are running up and down the field for 60 minutes. And it's also about making sure that our clubs are open and inclusive, and welcoming the new Irish and new elements of our community. but also that we're cognizant of the older members of our community, and is our club age friendly, and are we giving back to those on whose shoulders we are standing, and maybe helped develop our clubs and our communities in the 40s and 50s and 60s when Ireland was on its knees.
Yeah, you gave, I suppose, over the last couple of weeks, I was reading different things that you'd done, but you gave an interview on the GAA website, GAA.e. So before I get to that, for anyone that wanted to find out more about the Healthy Club stuff, what's the link on the website for that?
Yeah, it's gaa.ie/community. And we're hoping to go into phase 3 at the start of 2018 and open it up to about 150 clubs. So if there, we will be opening up expressions of interest, and if any club is interested in getting on board. And a bit of a shameless plug here, we just have to give a huge thanks to Irish Life, who have come on board as CSR partners with us on this here initiative as well. We couldn't be looking at the scaling up of the Healthy Club project to a national project without their support and the ongoing support of the Department of Health and the Healthy Ireland.
Well, the evolution has been huge, and that article on the GAA website was around sort of the development of that and I suppose getting the GAA to a healthier place. But I picked out a quote, and when I read it, it felt really strong, and I was going to read it out. I'll read it anyway. I think I have a better sense of where it came from anyway, but the quote was that it's not good enough for us just to say that people are feeling disenfranchised from their clubs in some communities. We have a responsibility to bring them in, and this is one of the ways that we can give something back. That's obviously a huge driver within you and a huge motivation for the work that you've done, because, as you've mentioned already, there has been a massive amount of evolution, and it must be the place that it's in now. It must fill you with a certain degree of pride of what's happened and where it's potentially going to go to.
It's very, very humbling, Alan, because it's all been driven by volunteers in their clubs, and the GAA has always played a huge part in supporting the health of its members and its communities through obviously the physical activity of engaging in our Gaelic games, but also the kind of social cohesion that it provides. And we know from research that the biggest driver of health in somebody's life is the number of genuine connections that they have with people in their life, people that they can turn to in times of need. That's the biggest driver of health. And the GAA, believe it or not, sometimes it mightn't be the best thing for our mental health, especially when you're coming from Leitrim, but it is a massive supporter. So now when I see the time and effort that volunteers are putting into their work at the Healthy Clubs, but also now we have a National Health and Wellbeing Committee, 4 Provincial Health and Wellbeing Committees, and 31 of 32 counties of Health and Wellbeing Committees in place. And these people are coming on doing this here after their day's work.
Yes.
They're bringing their experience and their expertise, but also their desire to see the GAA be the best sports association and community association that it can possibly be. And it's extremely humbling and very rewarding.
Yeah, it's like there's loads in that, and I think I know we referenced earlier on, say, that culture of business and how society evolves and changes, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse in different ways. But there is, a lot of time, society does find a way to self-correct in a way. And I think the Healthy Club is given a place to communities, be it schools, the teams, the wider community, an opportunity to correct things or make things, I suppose, maybe the best way to describe it is make things a little bit better. Like
that's we're not looking to, well, in our own way we are looking to change the world a little bit, but only a little bit for the better. And sometimes that can seem an impossible task, but I always loved the environmental phrase, think globally and act locally. And everybody can have a part to play in their own club in making it a slightly better club. One of the best ways you can do that is just by getting involved as a volunteer, and spreading the load on we hear a lot about player burnout. Volunteer burnout is every bit, if not more, of a challenge for all sporting associations and federations at the moment. So, we can all play a positive part, and just find what you can do at your capacity and bring that little bit of expertise that you might have from your own particular life experiences or your profession to the fore of your club that's trying to do the best for your children and the other children in your community.
Like, I think that sense of community and maybe the aspect of giving back, like, I think it was something that maybe drifted to a degree during, say, Celtic Tiger years, and there's loads of different, we'll not go into all the economic and the political and whatever you want to call them factors, but I noticed it too. But one of the things that I always struck me with the GAA was that no matter what was going on, no matter what was happening, one time that it always united very quickly was when there was a death. I knew I was going to be talking to this week, and I watched a documentary on Axel Foley last week. Did you watch it?
No, I have it recorded. Yeah,
it was really strong. Like, and you just sensed how their sport was obviously rugby, and how quickly it united a group, because there's a huge sense of loss, and it's got to help. Even though it mightn't be in their social norms to have certain conversations and to be vulnerable and to admit different things. Like, I thought it was really, really powerful how a sporting institution or whatever can be that community or sport network in itself. And I was going to ask you about what Philip McGuinness back 2010. If you're not comfortable talking about it, it's fine. I just thought, when that strikes, and I said bereavement is something that we all have to process, and I know from talking to loads of people, it's one of the things that causes such a strong impact on mental health of people at times, but unfortunately it just enters lives when sometimes we're least expecting it. That obviously, for yourself, for his club, for his family, for his county, must have been an awful lot to digest. And I think the GAA rallied really powerfully at that time.
Yeah.
What was that fair to say?
Yeah, it was coming, believe it or not, it was 12 years after the county had experienced another massive loss in Shane McGettigan, and Shane would have been a great friend of mine. I played minor and under 21 with him with Leitrim, and he died in a building site accident over in Boston, along with a lad, Ronan Stewart, from County Louth. And Phillies was an in-game tragedy. It was against my own club, actually, Melbourne Gales. Just a completely freakish and accidental clash off the head, and he never regained consciousness. And I remember us even leaving the field that day, and Philly's brother Michael, who would have been a county teammate of mine for years, as was Philly, obviously, and his other brother John wasn't playing that day, if I recall correctly, with the club. And when we were heading off, the ambulance had arrived. We just thought Philly's going to be taken off, and we'll check in on them the next morning. And then the next morning we were woken up. I was woken up that Philly's up in Beaumont, and they're going to have to turn off the machine. And it was just such a shock. And myself and Gareth Phelan headed for Dublin, and the Mohill lads and Leitrim teammates a lot of them had made the trip up to the city. And afterwards, there was it really rocked our own club as well, and shook it, but it also, like you said, it brought the GAA. It brought out the very best in the GAA at the time, and I hope that the McGuinnesses had the same. Looking back now on it, feel the same, because I just had. I was at the GPA past players dinner the day before the football final, and Michael was up, Philly's brother, sitting beside me, and often, when I think of Philly, might drop Michael a text on his anniversary and the likes, and there was a bond created at that time, alright, between the players and the whole community, and it helped. It helped deal with an extremely difficult situation. And I remember Mickey Hart came down to give a kind of what you might call a debrief session, or had a talk with the Leitrim panel afterwards. And one of the things that really struck with me that he said, because we were heading into championship, the player was common in the hide, and I had the injury, so I wasn't going to be playing, but the other lads, he said to the boys, and we had a really good discussion. It wasn't that Mickey was talking to us at all. He was facilitating discussion within the squad about how we were feeling and what emotions the whole experience had brought up. And we were just talking about the match, and he noted just the importance. You can't go out and win this game for Philly, because there's no that guarantee doesn't exist in sport. You might want to, but you can't guarantee that. But what you can do is you can go out and you can give your absolute all, and you can play the way that Philly always played, and then you can actually live with the result happily, and have no regrets, and know that if Philly is looking down from somewhere, that he'll know that too, that you gave your all. So I remember it was similar at the time when Shane died, and there was the added trauma for the family of getting Shane's body home from Boston. And I'll never forget standing at the bottom of the hilly road up in Drumshambo when the hearse was coming down from Dublin, and I'm still very close with Charlie and Gretty and Shane's sisters, called in on them just a couple of weeks ago, actually, when I went out to visit Shane's grave up in Drumshambo, you know, and still hard to believe, you know, that it's 1998 and the age of 21. But again, there was just this coming together of the GAA community, but the entire community that helped carry some of the weight and share some of the grief, and allowed a space for me as a young man at the time of Shane's funeral, and as a slightly older man at the time of Philly's, to have a space to be that little bit vulnerable in.
Yes. And
to have a few shoulders to lean on when you needed it, and to actually learn an awful lot from that grieving period and experience, and to see that even in the midst of great loss and trauma, there is it's okay to feel like that at that time, but also to transition through that grief as well, and to learn to live with the loss. And that's what you do. You live with that loss, obviously much more so for the McGettigans and the McGuinnesses. And I think their example is an example to us all. And I lost a brother myself, Gordon, in 2002 in a car crash. Here's the next one up from me. And the way the GAA community rallied around at that time, even though you're in a daze and you're living with one foot in two worlds at a time of loss like that, it's only afterwards that you realise, Jesus, such and such, haven't seen that man since we played DIT and Trench Cup in 1997, and 5 years later, there they are making a trip halfway across the country just to let you know that they heard about your loss, and they want to let you know that they're thinking about you.
Yeah,
and that's powerful stuff.
I really, really enjoyed having that conversation with Colin, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it too. For me, it was a timely reminder that while we all want to be our best and excel, there's also much more important things in the world than only caring for winning or losing. After the conversation we had in Croke Park, I spent a long time thinking about the importance of connection, both with people and places, and there's no doubt that the GAA can help build those networks when harnessed in the right way. For anyone that would like to learn more about the GAA's Healthy Club project, please go to www.gaa.ie/community. That's gaa.ie/community. Last but not least, to help out Alan Kearns, who featured in episode 13 of this podcast, I'm running through a bog on November 4th to help raise funds for a children's home in Zambia. It saves and changes the lives of many, and it's a project that he's been supporting for over 10 years. If any listener can spare a couple of euro, I'd really appreciate your support, as I can guarantee you that any donation you make, no matter how big or small, will positively impact on a life in ways that you can't even imagine. You can find the link to my fundraising page in the article of this podcast on realtalks.ie, or you can get it on Twitter, as is pinned to the top of my timeline. Just search for AOM the Cat into the Twitter box. That's AOMTHECAT, AOM the Cat. My name is Alan O'Mara, and you've been listening to episode 16 of the Real Talks podcast.